And we are live. Welcome to episode 12 of the Martial Arts Mastery Podcast. I am your host, Grandmaster Jonathan Field, and we have a special guest with us today. We have Shidoshi J. Courtland Elliott II. I met him many moons ago at the Santos Martial Art, and he has a vast um, array of knowledge in the martial art. Specifically, I know I'm going to get this wrong, I guess in various arts of jiu-jitsu for my lack of knowledge of that. But how you doing today, sir?
Oh, you can see me. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought my mask was working. I'm great. I'm great. I'm very much honored and flattered that you asked me on this, and I hope I do well. I hope I pass the audition, as a famous Liverpool man used to say.
No, I think you will. No, like I said, you and I have known each other. Oh God,
20
since
plus years.
oh yeah, I can say it's got to be in the early 2000s. Shortly after I bought Cobourg Taekwondo here and started going
Ever,
up.
ever
Okay,
since you were a small child. So
pretty much.
it's got to be 20 plus years.
Yes, I still haven't grown up yet. So let's fill people in. When I say ninjutsu would be more of a overview of what you do, right? Like kung fu is an overview of Chinese martial art, not necessarily Pacific martial art. But so when I say ninjutsu, specifically, what style or styles does that fall under for you?
How long have you got?
We got well over an hour, sir.
Okay, well let me start with this. The word ninjutsu is more of a category, like kung fu and karate, jujitsu. It covers a lot of ground.
Mhm.
When you say karate, it could be Okinawa Shorin Ryu or Shito Ryu, or fill in the blank. It covers a
Mhm.
lot of ground. It's like saying hamburger. You can get a
Correct.
hamburger at Wendy's, which is not the same as a hamburger at McDonald's, but
No.
none of them are like a hamburger at Harvey's for those
Exactly.
who are
Yep.
Canadian.
Yep. Yep.
So, uh, for the ninjutsu, it covers the way I've had my training. It covers armed, unarmed strategies, and the strategies are not just strategies for dealing with a person. The strategies are also things like dealing with the environment, taking advantage of environmental conditions, depending on whatever it is that you're trying to do. The armed is, anything that you can put in your hand. Unarmed is you don't have anything in your hand necessarily. Maybe you've cut off someone else's hand and you're using that to slap them with, as we may have seen in some movies and cartoons. That would still be armed. So that being said, the tradition that I have been trained in is called the Bujinkan Dojo, which was developed by our Grandmaster Hatsumi Masaaki 40, 50 years ago. I have been training for 43 years in ninjutsu and other things. I have not focused solely on it, but it's been 43 years, 42 years and 10 months is probably a little more accurate. But the specifics in this tradition, which is historically traceable, where, God help us, a lot of them aren't. They just have that name, much like there's Taekwondo places that use Japanese terminology.
Mhm.
So is that really Korean martial arts? Maybe not. My point being is I have stayed involved with this tradition because it is authentic. There are documents going back hundreds of years. I have seen some of them. And the Japanese government, if I understood correctly, acknowledges, yep, this one's real. governments are governments. I'll leave it at that. But I have been impressed since day one with Stephen Hayes, who is my original teacher, student of Hatsumi Sensei, one of the first Westerners involved in this training, and one of the first to try to push it out into the world. Stephen Hayes has written a lot of books, which is how a lot of people have come to this training. That's kind of a roundabout answer. I'm not sure if that answers the question, but I'll leave you with one last piece. In the weapons training, there are certain specific weapons that are considered cornerstone pieces. The sword, the knife, the chain or rope, the long pole, the short pole. These are fundamental tools. We like to use the word tools for training, but you can extrapolate them to something else. I can train with a rope. I can train with, I'll back up on this. In Canada, chains are specifically, no, don't do that. So in Canada, we use ropes for sure. And ropes are used in other places because they inflict a little less damage on your training partner while you're training, as opposed to using a chain with a weight on the end. In the United States, where they're legal, I'll practice with those. Here in Canada, where they're not, I will not. And I strongly encourage my Canadian students not to train with anything that could get them in trouble without giving it its full consideration. If they choose to do something, I'm not going to advise people to jaywalk, but if they jaywalk, it's on them. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. Actually, so that's a very interesting point. That's such a classical martial art example of whatever country you're in, that's how that martial art got developed, or how that martial art or martial art weapon got developed. Like, that's why you have the Okinawans had certain weapons based off of farming tools when actual weapons were outlawed during Japanese occupation, right? So,
Yep.
same thing here in Canada, you're saying that the chain is illegal or shouldn't be used here in Canada, but a rope is virtually the same tool, but it's more illegal. So, what are laws?
As a training aid,
Yeah.
I want to be clear on that.
Oh, for sure. Not for actual real combat. We're not allowed to defend ourselves with weapons. That a different story for every time, really.
Self-defense is, for lack of a better term, what we're training for in martial arts generally. There is a physical aspect to most martial arts, and there's sometimes a spiritual or mental aspect to many martial arts.
Correct.
The physical aspect is generally around self-defense.
Correct. Yeah.
MMA, maybe not so much self-defense as sport. Judo, absolutely sport. Let me preface by saying I will speak in absolutes, but everything is relative.
Correct.
If I say judo is a sport, there are people who practice judo as a almost meditative exercise.
Exactly.
For them, there is no sport aspect. But I will speak in absolutes. Gentle viewers, remember, an absolute is being represented here, but it's still all relative. So back to you, Master Jonathan.
Yeah, I was going to say that. I've known you for forever now, and that's exactly how you've always spoken, in absolute, what's in relative. That's totally for sure. Like I said, again, I guess I would say most people that start martial art, fitness and self-defense. And then some people get into the sports aspect of it, and then depending on the school or dojang or academy, like Taekwondo has the Olympic sport, and then you have the more traditional Taekwondo that I focus on, which is more for that self-defense point, but then you also get that fitness part into it. We were discussing this off air, but we were discussing the term Shidoshi. I know I'm gonna have to rename this podcast because you don't like the term Grandmaster. You said that's for your instructor. But can you kind of go into the whole, I guess about an explanation of your title of Shidoshi versus maybe only having one Grandmaster in a Pacific style and stuff along that line?
So the easy way to look at it is, for us, there is one Grandmaster at a time who owns is responsible for, better word, is responsible for the particular lineage. Hatsumi Sensei is responsible for a bunch of them. They have, through various means, come to him, and he is the Grandmaster, the Soke in Japanese, of a bunch of schools. He has synthesized is not really the word that I want to use, because synthesize means that things are no longer what they are separately, but he has combined the different aspects of the different schools, technical, physical,
Maybe the word
intuitive.
you used to the synergy, maybe?
There is synergy, absolutely, but what he has done is he will maybe cherry pick is a good way to say it. Cherry pick some of the striking techniques from one school and the sword techniques of another school and the stick techniques of another school, because each school would have its specialties. Each school would have its areas of great emphasis. And putting together this Bujinkan Dojo training, I'll get to that in a moment, has been not so much a synthesis as a cooperative collection. There's probably a better way to say it. At any rate, I'm going to move through with that. So I have been involved. I have been involved with Bujinkan Dojo training for almost 43 years. I think we discussed it was 42 years and 10 months. But, you know, after 40, who counts? So the training that I have received and the training that I have worked on my own have brought me to a place where I have, to my mind, a pretty good understanding of what a body can do and a pretty good understanding of what you can do to a body. And I've been able to teach people of all kinds of different abilities, of all kinds of different sizes and shapes and ages and levels of understanding. And I'm very proud of some of my successes. Sidebar, just in case anyone's looking, I do fight choreography for film and television, and I could use some work, just saying. But
yeah, actually, on that, I'm looking forward to working that
for me,
too.
for me to be able to take an actor who knows nothing and then make them look dangerous in a pretty short period of time is very fulfilling. Very fulfilling. I hope that answered the question.
No, actually, the last part of that was the term Shidoshi. So we were discussing that
Right.
offline.
Sorry.
Yeah. And
So
you had plus on your
so
shirt there.
Shidoshi is a term created by Hatsumi Sensei and now is out in the world, and other people are piggybacking on it. I don't know what Japanese copyright rules are like, but seemingly it didn't happen. Shidoshi, the characters, which I don't have in my fingertips, basically translate as teacher of the warrior way of enlightenment. Shi, do, shi is how you would break it down in characters. So there's 3 characters. That term is used for individuals who have achieved a level of accomplishment where they are considered to be teachers. And this is the term that I have used for myself.
Okay.
It is usually given at the 5th degree level.
Okay.
And I I could tell you a long story about that one too.
That's
And
really
invariably, it involves what's called the Saki test, which is the reacting to a feeling of danger. Exactly that one. And I was ambushed for my Saki test because I had done no preparation. I didn't expect it. I thought, oh I'll do mine years from now. And I showed up and it's, oh, you come, you're doing the test. I won't tell you what I was saying and thinking in my head because it would be impolite, but holy schmoly. Anyway, so for myself, I prefer the Shidoshi title, which is my teaching license. The Grandmaster is the one person, the Soke. Hatsumi Sensei is the Soke, the Grandmaster of the Bujinkan Dojo. He is, and I'm not up to date on this one, but he is retiring or retired and has given the Soke-ship of some of these different schools to some of the very, very senior master instructors. And I am out of the loop on who has what. So if you were to ask me, I would just say, I don't know.
Okay, so
it can be looked up, but I don't have it in my head.
so when you just said that, you just said that he gave it to a few people. So is that now are you saying that there's now more than one grandmaster of that style now?
No.
Right.
The Bujinkan Dojo was this, I think you used the term synthesis, which I am not 100% in agreement with the term. It would look perhaps like a synthesis, but it's not cutting off a piece here because this other piece is what it should. No, all of these different schools have their own soke, but all of them happen to come into Hatsumi Sensei. He is just parsing them off. If we were to use a more business-like model, imagine someone owns Warren Buffett, who's a famous investor, and I'm speculating here because I don't know the man. I don't know all of his history, but he's got 30 different companies that he has acquired over time.
Mm-hmm.
And when he gets to the point of his retirement, he's decided, well, I'm not going to keep them all in this one group. It's not going to be all in one corporate structure. I'm going to give or sell, more likely, this one here, this one here, this one there, so that the major corporate structure has been broken up voluntarily, unlike Bell Canada, which I believe had to have a breakup that was enforced by the government. But this is just giving them off. It's no longer under one person.
Yeah, it's like having the mother corporation owning several corporations underneath them. Yeah, we're studying that business law. Yep.
And then the mother corporation, when all of them have been released,
Mm-hmm.
dissolves. I honestly still can't tell you where we are in that de-evolution of what was the Bujinkan Dojo.
Mm-hmm.
I do know that the senior Japanese instructors seem to, some of them had a very close affinity with one particular school. So they themselves specialized in one particular school. And that's probably why they would be given the Soke-ship, the Grandmaster responsibility for that particular school. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. Yep.
Right.
Well, I guess it's kind of very closely to how you look at the Taekwondo terms. You had the 9 Kwons, like Mun Kwon, Taekwondo, Taekwondo, et cetera. They all kind of became one under the term Taekwondo, and then now it's kind of half and half. Where you still have the Taekwondo, but you still have the Kwons are still kind of smaller and inconsistent. They're still in existence, but it's not like they once were. I think it's very similar to that.
It could well be. Yes.
Yeah.
It sounds like it. Yes.
Yes, it does. Yeah, there's always there's all. I don't want to say politics, but there's definitely like sometimes people just don't agree politely. Don't disagree. They disagree with each other politely about the direction of that martial art. So they split off and kind of do their own thing, and that's how martial art evolves as well. And for whether it's good or bad, it's not for anybody to really decide that. But so you're saying so in order for you to get your fifth dan or degree, you had to do that test that you actually had us run through last year, our black belt testing here. Can you kind of like some people think it's mystical. Sometimes it's kind of a secret in the digital world, or for lack of a better word, can you kind of maybe describe that a little bit for the people that may not know what that's all about?
I can only describe my personal experience of it and my experience of training other people to pass it.
Okay.
It is a connection between people. The connection is intuitive, maybe. That's probably as close as we're going to get in the English language, where the candidate and the tester have a connection that allows the candidate to move in sync with the tester. So as you remember, what it is the candidate's here, the tester is there, and the tester with sword in hand is going to hit the candidate at some point. The candidate's job is to get out of the way and not be touched. When I was in Japan that time, it was announced we're going to do these fifth dan tests. And I was very excited because the only time I had been around fifth dan tests had been sometime before in England, where it was being done in a hotel. But the only people allowed in the testing area were Hatsumi Sensei, the senior Japanese instructors, the senior European instructors who had already passed, and whatever students are being tested, and nobody else. It was secret, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
Not secret as in I'll have to kill you if I tell you about it, but secret in that we're just going to keep this private, much like a.
It's like a power weekend.
I don't need to give an example.
Yeah, it's it's like power weekend to Santos or our black belt testing here. We keep the the parents and friends and family element, and it's just the candidates and the instructors.
Right. Yeah. There are things and times that are kept private, like HR interviews. Those are kept private. You don't necessarily. Maybe you'll bring a lawyer, but that's about it.
Exactly.
So I'm sitting in these bleachers in this huge. It was the Tokyo Budokan that we were using for this event, this 3-day training event, and it was the end of the day of the first day, and I got real excited when they said, "Oh, and we're going to do these Godan tests." I said, "Cool! I get to see one." And the senior English instructor, bless his name, came by and says, "Hey, cool, yeah, you're being tested. Go," because I was a fourth dan at the time, but I was a newly minted fourth dan. I hadn't had it for more than a year or so. So I go, and the setup is the candidate is in seiza, kneeling, facing away from the tester who's behind. The tester in this case was Hatsumi Sensei. In the intervening years, that job also has devolved to senior Japanese and other instructors. I expect that I could administer the Saki test and grade someone on it, but I choose not to, because I don't want to deal with the paperwork. Don't tell anyone. So I'm in my position. I'm thinking, what's going on? What's going on? What's going on? And I move and I got clipped on the shoulder. And I was thinking, that's cool. That's cool. I almost passed. I feel so good about that. And Hatsumi Sensei looks down and says, we'll test you again tomorrow.
Talk about stress.
Well, one of the senior Japanese instructors who I count as a friend, we phone each other a couple times a year. He had a class that night and invited me and I think 3 of the other candidates who did not pass. There was maybe a dozen people, and there was half of them didn't pass. Some of them got hit on the head. It was like flat out, nope. Mine, I felt very good with, where I just got a scratch on the shoulder. Shidoshi Sensei had us come to his dojo and mostly ignored his own students to help give us some tips on how you can prepare, how you can move, what will work, what might not work. That's my memory of it. So the next day after training, we get, okay, next. And the people that trained with the Shidoshi Sensei all passed. That's my memory of it. My pass was, and strangely enough, I've got it on video somewhere. I am in Seiza. I had buggered up my knee that day. One of the American seniors is over there saying, well, you could do it standing. You don't have to kneel. And what you see on the video is me going, I'm going to do it right, or I'm going to do it not at all.
Exactly.
And that's what you see on the video, because you don't see him talking. You see me do that. And what's going through my head is, just hit me. Let's get this over with. And I open my eyes, and Hatsumi Sensei is like a meter away from me. I have, only because I've got it on video, I have rolled and turned and come up into a guard position without any thought, conscious thought. And that's my experience of my test. What I have been doing when I'm coaching people, when I'm, for lack of a better term, teaching people, but I don't think I'm teaching them, I'm coaching them, is I'm getting them into a headspace where their mind is not getting in the way and they are receptive to energy. And I will just pause. I'll be completely neutral in my brain. And then at some point I will flip the switch and hit them. So to be clear, it's a bamboo sword that if I hit them hard, I won't kill them.
It's a
for practice.
Yeah.
But I've also seen Hatsumi Sensei do this with the senior instructors with a real sword.
Okay.
So they've got a lot of practice at that. They're good. They're good at it. I will not take that away from them. I don't believe I am at that point, and I choose not to. So okay. The thing that I train people to do is to try to get out of their own way, to just let go and be receptive. And this plays into, I believe we did some of the proximity sensing exercises at that last class.
Yes, we did that last
class. It builds on exactly that.
Yep, and we did it once before at the Santo. I came in late the one time. Well, I wasn't late. I wasn't scheduled to be there until later, and you had already done it. So you took myself and one of my students, one of my old Team 6 partners for nunchucks to a private room, and you had us doing that. And with that exercise, we found that her and I both had a very high success rate because we worked very closely together. So we had that bond that you mentioned earlier.
That connection, yes.
Yeah, connection. And then I did find that with when we were doing it here last year, I had a connection with certain people more than
Yep.
other people. And that's just a natural thing, right? In humanity, you're just naturally gonna have a natural connection to certain people just for no apparent reason, right? That's just part of life. Yeah. But now that you did that test with your grandmaster, have you had a connection prior to that? Like, do you have a lot of like in-person training with him and a relationship with him, or is that why you think it works so good? Like, what's your interpretation of that?
Okay. I started training in 1981. I went down to Ohio and spent a week at a camp having my mind blown. I had been training in jiu-jitsu for many years with the late Steve Reynolds, who was an awesome teacher. He would have been a great interview for you because I'm just going to leave it at that. He would have been a great interview for you.
The name rings a bell slightly. I don't know where I heard it from, but yeah.
Jiu-Jitsu Kai out of Richmond Hill.
Okay.
That was his school. At any rate, I trained with him for many years and literally asked his permission to go to this ninja thing. And he said, oh, yeah, sure. And here's the technique. And I thought, oh, okay, this is him just being a little bit wild, which he was. 3 years later, they taught us that technique.
Okay, cool.
I have no clue where he came up with it. At any rate, I spent that week in 1981 having my mind blown, and what came to my heart, my consciousness is this is the martial art that I have been looking for, having done maybe 6 others previously. Jiu-jitsu was very close, but the ninjutsu was exactly it because of the mental training, because of the connectivity between the weapons training and the unarmed training. It was just such a, there's that word again, synthesis, but it's not a synthesis. It's just everything.
My brain, I want to say synergy. There's that synergy of two things coming together and working. Yeah.
I don't have a really good word for it in English. At any rate, the next year, Hatsumi Sensei came to the United States, his first trip outside of Japan in his life. He was in his 50s, I think. And we had a week-long festival, ninja festival. For some reason, he just liked me. I cannot tell you why, but he just sort of glommed onto me. And ever since then, I've been waiting for the other shoe to drop. That, okay, there's something behind this. He wants something. He's expecting something. I don't know what it is. And it always was a kind of source of stress with me that I really want to please him. I don't know what he wants. He only spoke Japanese. My Japanese is useless. But over the years in between, I'd see him 6 or 8 times. And he always just seemed to light up when he saw me. Maybe because I'm this big, heavy white guy and he can pick me up and throw me around like a rag doll. Maybe that was just fun for him. I don't know. I do know that some of the other master instructors did like that part because they liked throwing around rag dolls.
Mm-hmm. For that.
Yeah, but he would be the only up until maybe the 90s. He was the only person who administered the Saki test, and the senior instructors would be on the corners, much like you'd have judges at a karate tournament on the corners to observe. And he has his eyes closed when he's cutting. So he doesn't see the response.
Okay.
He looks to the instructors to see whether or not they give a thumbs up. And again, I have this on video. I'm there, and my brain's going, what just happened? How did I get here? Why am I like this? Hatsumi Sensei would shake hands with everyone who passed. He came up and he gave me a hug. And I don't ever remember seeing that before or since. So there's something that he liked about me.
Or maybe he sensed something in you. There's just certain.
There's something, I don't know what it is. I'm not going to fight it. But like I say, I've always waited for that other shoe to drop.
Yeah, no, I see that. I've seen that in martial arts where, for one reason, a master or grandmaster just seems to have that one disciple. For whatever reason, there's that connection there. You know, you can't explain it. I mean, I've experienced it myself. You can't explain it. You can't put it. It is what it is.
I can explain it.
Yeah.
And you can just either say yes or no.
Mm-hmm.
He was my Mr. Miyagi.
Yep.
I don't know what else to say, because
I totally get it. So
beat up on Daniel-san for sure. All that wax on, wax off.
But I know when you were at my dojo there last year, you said it felt like, oh, how did you describe it? Like it was almost like his will pushed you on the way, or something along that line.
Yep, that's probably the best way to describe it. But I don't know what else to say. But that's kind of what it must have been. And having reviewed the video a number of times, it just, I'm gonna have to look at it again.
Yeah, I would love to see that at some point. Wondering if you can record it on your phone and show me next time we meet or whatever, because I would love to see that footage. That, you know, I'm interested in that kind of stuff. So
yeah, it's actually on a copyright video, but I will, next time we're together, I'll try to bring it with me.
Okay.
Because I don't want to.
I'm assuming it's on VHS or something along that line, then.
I believe I have it on DVD.
Okay, so if it's so this test is supposed to be secretive, but yet there's footage of it on a copyright. That's a little counterintuitive.
I will make the effort to make sure that you get to see it. I'm committing to this. You have witnesses, but I don't feel appropriate just putting it out into the world.
I agree. That's something very personal that you can share with certain people. And we all know, like in martial art, there is certain pieces of knowledge that only gets passed down to certain people as well. Right? And whether certain techniques or whether certain mental techniques or manipulation of one's chi or whatever it is. But there is just certain things that needs to be passed down one-on-one, not to the masses, right? That's partially the responsibility of higher martial art instructors as well. But okay, so to kind of go off martial arts for a little bit, you're also, I always joke around with my students about this, that Canada has ninjas in our military. So you also have served our country. So I applaud you for that. I always say that you have to respect and honor our men and women in the military. You don't have to necessarily agree with whatever wars that they're fighting, but the fact that they believe in representing our country, defending our country, that's something that's, you know, very honorable, and I applaud you for that. But can you kind of tell me a little bit about your military background?
Okay. I would like to back up just for a quick moment, if you don't mind, because of this. Wrong side. Never mind.
Yep.
This is how I run my martial arts life. Those characters are Budo Denju, martial arts wisdom sharing. And that's what I choose to do. That's what I try to do. And that's actually a slogan that I came up with.
Okay.
And when I got promoted, I actually happened to have this vest with me in Japan and went to a local embroiderer and had them do that. It's also on my belt.
Very nice.
But I just wanted to throw that in just to put a capper on that that other piece of the story. So I started off as a reservist. I was always a reservist in that I never joined the regular force. I never had a full-time commitment to the military, but I did a fair amount of full-time service
Okay.
as a reservist on a call out or a deployment, stuff like that, where I would, for lack of a better term, I'd have a contract that was a short-term contract, not over the course of years. For instance, I did a UN tour. I have the Nobel Peace Prize from 1987 in Egypt.
What?
I was at the Montreal Olympics in uniform. Sidebar, while I was there, after the opening day ceremonies, I'm just wandering around. That was not my job. My job was on the other side of the river where I was the junior NCO in charge of all of the reservists. And I had the day off for the opening day at the Olympics. So I went with another of my buddies. I went in uniform. He was a civilian, but he was taking pictures the whole time. And somewhere I have a picture of me after the opening ceremonies in the underground parking lot, talking with an old man to just keep him entertained while he was obviously waiting for someone to come and pick him up. Nice, charming, interesting old man. We talked military subjects and this and that. And since he was from where my mother was born, he was very pleased to chat with me. That was John Diefenbaker, former prime minister, who would have been in his 80s. So I had to throw that in just for my own little. So I did the Montreal Olympics, for instance. One of my first jobs was firefighting in Algonquin Park, because they literally called out the military to help in 1973 in the summertime. I've done all kinds of different things. I've worn a bunch of different cap badges. I finished my career and retired from being an instructor and supervisor for Army cadets with the 48th Highlanders of Canada. And I very proudly wore a kilt for almost 10 years. Does that give you enough to work with?
Yes, sir. Actually, yeah, because it's funny how you mentioned long hair, because I've always known you to have that military style brush cut and whatever.
Yep.
And when you spoke at the Dojang last year, it's like, oh my God, he's got long hair. It's like, that's different. Yeah.
So I've not had a haircut in 2.5 years. So if anyone's good with math, they now know how old I am.
True. Yeah.
The funny thing is about ninjas in the military is when I was out, I got out for about 20 years because of a disagreement. Let's put it that way. And then rejoined. But while I was out, and I cannot tell you how this came about, I was approached to teach unarmed combat to military engineers and other soldiers by a man who later became the commanding officer of that military engineers unit. And we dealt with things like having a gun to your head and dealing with that. I taught people who were about to be deployed to Bosnia And that's one of the reasons we did that, because that's one of the things that had happened to Canadians.
Yeah.
Not necessarily being killed, but being threatened.
Mhm.
And I'm very proud of the feedback that I got from the people that I trained, because they found it very valuable. They found it very interesting. Some of them we're still in contact. So back to the ninjas in the military. Our special forces people, I would be amazed to find out if they haven't had connections to people like, for instance, my friend Jack, who started training the same day I did in this Bujinkan dojo, but has done much better. He's had better access. His life was set up so that he could have more access. And he was also a Marine captain, U.S. Marine captain, when he started. So he was connected there. He is, or was, I don't know if he still is, connected as a consultant, as a civilian, for the U.S. Marines official unarmed combat training, and helped craft its curriculum, if I understand correctly. And just a demon with a knife. But I think he'd prefer to be known as a jazz guitarist now.
Yeah, no, speaking of special forces, yeah, I had one of my former students for a while when he was training with me. He was stationed in Trenton Air Base, and one of was it the J, what do they call it? The JTF or what are special forces? I can't remember what it's called.
Right.
From Trenton. But yeah, no. So, but he was saying like, yeah, like they're like part of their job when they're back over here in Canada, like they're constantly training martial arts, whether it be like jiu-jitsu, taekwondo, kickboxing, and like they're just practicing all the different arts. And what you get with the special forces, you'll get different people coming in with different arts, and they're sharing and collaborating all the different techniques, and they're kind of creating their own sub-style, I guess, or a training method. So it's kind of cool to know that at least our special forces is well trained in combatives and conflict resolution and de-escalating and all that sort of stuff. But another thing I wanted to bring up is, so in martial arts in general, there's different paths, right? You have some martial art people will, or martial artists will stay on the path of just being a student their whole life. Well, all of us should be continuous lifelong students, but then some people will be more of a martial arts athlete in their career. Some people will be more like normal destined to be the martial art teacher. That's their journey in martial art. Some of them obviously have a mixed bag of nuts. Like myself was a competitor and instructor. Do you find that as well, like all the different martial artists that you get to interact with and have interacted with, that certain people are just met solely to be the teachers of the martial art, versus other people are more solely purpose was to be more the athlete in the martial arts?
I am not, and never have claimed to be, an athlete. I have taught running for most of a decade, for instance, with the running room, actually up until COVID. I have run a marathon. I don't want to do that again. It's stupid.
It's horrible. If you don't love running, it's horrible, I know.
Yeah, but every year I've been assisting with the Toronto Marathon, for instance. The range of people in martial arts is like the range of people, period. There are some who are not equipped to teach in their own mind. I knew a guy who was an absolute genius who absolutely refused to teach. No, I don't do that. I don't do that. But he was a supremely gifted technician. He had a very good eye. He was clever. He was quick. And it was a sad waste of resources. But intrinsically, he wasn't up for it. And that, that's okay. I can't I can't beat up on someone for being true to themselves.
Sure.
I just recognize that as a shame. I've known other people who, sidebar, I'm a first aid instructor. I have a license with Red Cross, St. John Ambulance, Heart and Stroke, Stop the Bleed. I'm an instructor for all of these different organizations. And I have seen people who are licensed instructors, but I sure would not want to be, I would not want to be served by one of their students just because their understanding is lacking. There are people in the martial arts world similarly who will learn 2 things, put out their shingle, and teach 6 things. Well, do you remember the film Dr. Detroit? It's a Dan Aykroyd film in which he, at some point in the film, is scaring off some thugs, and he's doing this kind of hand motion, and he's saying, and I'm well read in Hapkido and 2 other forms of martial arts. Well read. He scares them off, but it's just such a funny line. Yeah. And it's so appropriate for some people. I'm sure you've met folks who lay claim to being able to teach one hung low, and they know one hung low because they heard the record. So it's just a funny thing that way. Yes, there are people who are good at something. So I know a guy who is a almost multi-generational competition winner. John is just, he's a phenom, and he's been doing this for so long. It's embarrassing. I could never keep up with him, but that's not my space. My space is learning and understanding and being able to communicate to another person who may know nothing, but I'll be able to get them to the point where they can accomplish something. And hopefully that will encourage them to continue, whether it's first aid, martial arts, public speaking, whatever.
Yeah,
I am a really good coach.
Yeah, that's my experience. I'm like, I definitely noticed, just watching these medical students, there's just certain students that are natural athletes, and that's what they're really good at. I have people that are maybe not as gifted as an athlete, but they're really good teachers. I do find like I have a few people that I swear to God, like the whole reason why they were brought into martial arts, and whether it be the universe or God or whatever how you all believe it, the reason that they were brought into martial arts was to specifically teach certain elements of martial art, and that for whatever reason, like this period, I do think that certain people are lucky enough to kind of find that calling. I think for me, earlier in my career was definitely the martial arts athlete and the competitive ranking, but as I'm getting older, I definitely see it's like, in the bigger scheme of martial art, I was meant to be an instructor and lead a school. That's definitely more what I was meant to. Not the trophies are nice and all, but what you can give to your students is far greater. I definitely have a few students that are like that. And then also like what we kind of alluded to, there's people that are I'm just gonna randomly say a rank, a 4th degree. Some people are 4th degree, and then there's people that are really 4th degree black belts, if you know what I mean. Like certain people, they just got the rank of 4th, they just got by, but then there's people that they embody what a real 4th degree really is. If you know where I'm going at.
Well, when I did that 5th degree test, that Saki test, I was a pretty new 4th degree. And like I said, I was not prepared for it. I was not expecting it. It was the bolt of lightning that came down and slammed me to the ground. So I understand what you mean. I was not, to my mind, the 4th degree who should be prepped for that 5th degree test.
Your self-interpretation of yourself, not what other people see you as.
I understand. I understand your meaning, but I do recognize that there's a certain there's a word for it in English, and I'm not coming up with it. But basically, there's a certain leavening. Leavening. If you're a baker, you'll understand that. But there's a certain amount of experience that you really need to inhabit that rank fully. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah, no, for sure. So yeah, like I said, you've done the military thing, you've done the whole martial arts thing, but yet you seem, I'm gonna butcher this term because it's not even correct. I'm gonna say you're kind of almost like a rodent in that you don't teach at one specific school or you don't have a school. You just kind of almost like a ninja, just kind of show up. You kind of have a what's the word? A tenure at the Santos martial art, or maybe not so much now. I haven't really been around as much.
COVID crashed that. I had an ongoing class that I had every month. Their sunrise group. So at 6 a.m, I would be teaching various and sundry things. I would like to, before we run out of time, I would like to give you my martial path, because we didn't express that. We didn't explore that. My first martial arts experience is probably with my family members throwing each other onto a couch, watching Saturday afternoon cowboy movies. And I would be doing that at like 7 or 8. Just throwing each other onto a couch. At around 14, I went into a school where one of the math teachers, who was German, also taught judo after school. And he was one of the meanest people you could ever want to train with. He would never let us win, but he never even let us come close. I think he just liked beating up on children. I don't know, but that's what it seemed like at the time. But it really sunk the hook. I really, I want to do this. I nagged my dad, and he took me around to a couple of different schools, including one from, I was going to mention the name, and now I think probably I shouldn't, but someone whose name is very well known to anyone who was active in the 70s, 80s, 90s, maybe even the 2000s, a name that is immediately recognizable in Central Ontario. And my dad passed on it because he just didn't like the way the contracts were set up.
Oh, okay.
This is very early martial art contract. This is middle 70s. I ended up training with the Twin Dragons at their first school shortly after they opened, again, mid 70s, and was with them for a couple of years. And it was interesting. It was hard. They were very, very, very hardcore. I expect they probably still are, if they're around. I honestly don't know anymore. And sort of drifted away from that. Was working at Hillcrest Mall, and in my department, there was a guy in the next department. We just hit it off, and he invited me to come to his martial arts school in Richmond Hill, and I joined Richmond Hill Jiu-Jitsu Kai almost in their first year. My friend was ultimately the first black belt made by Steve Reynolds. So my friend was right at the front edge and stayed with him for the longest time. I have stayed connected with Richmond Hill Jiu-Jitsu Kai, or now Richmond Hill Budokan, ever since 1977. Around 78, at the same time that I was doing jiu-jitsu in Richmond Hill, I'm living downtown, and I'm getting involved with Aikido, plus Aikido at the Japanese Canadian Cultural Center. I'm still in contact with Aikido people that I will be training with. I am not an Aikido person, but I've been around it a lot, and I see a lot of I see synergies with my Bujinkan training. I have we're about to run out of time, but I have a story about that.
Yeah, no, we can.
I'll tell you after. I'll tell you after, because I'm going to be naming names. So went away to the military, went away to Egypt, practiced there, tried to find Imi Lichtenfeld, the founder of Krav Maga, on leave in Israel. Never found him, but I knew about it. Didn't work out. I came back, different sundry things, worked with a martial arts collective at CFB Petawawa while I was working there. So one guy would be doing karate and I would show him jiu-jitsu, and we would just work with each other and learn new things. Went to university, had the same thing in university where there was this collective. One of the guys that I worked with is now the top Wado Ryu instructor in Western Canada, who we connected with my niece, who is now like number 2 or 3 in British Columbia, period. She's really good. Also got involved with Kempo, because there was a local guy teaching Kempo in Peterborough. Did some formal Iaido training. I'm trying not to miss anyone here. That pretty much covers it. The rest of it was like going to workshops and seminars. Had a eye-opening encounter with Dan Inosanto in the late 70s at a workshop in Toronto. And what's his name? Bill Wallace.
Oh, yep.
Richard Kim a number of times. All went to all the different workshops and seminars, which happened a lot in the 70s and 80s in Toronto. But I've literally been all over the map. Ninjutsu is where I feel is home, but I can appreciate other stuff. Oh, and 5 years of formal Tai Chi instruction with the Taoist Tai Chi, which I still play with a little bit.
So yeah, you have quite the vast experience, vast knowledge of different martial art, and you can you have a good idea of what works for you. You can kind of pick and choose out of each style, which would be work best for your mental strategy, your physical body, and whatever, which is extremely important for anybody that's interested in having a base martial art, but then adding other systems. Like we have our Taekwondo is our base martial art here, but I have like 8 or 9 other styles I've studied formally that I take the best parts of it and kind of incorporate that into especially our black belt curriculum where, we have like semesters, like every semester we have, besides our Taekwondo curriculum, we have specific self-defense, specific ways of sparring, whatever, from the inner style, just to help create a more well-rounded student. But, so we are, we came to slightly over the hour now, but I would love to definitely do this again with you sometime because it's very interesting, and I want to thank you for your time today.
You're very welcome. I probably have 15 minutes worth of stories to tell if we do this again.
Yeah, well, I think what we'll do is we'll pop off here, and you can tell me that what you want to tell me. So again, for everybody that's been listening for the last hour, thank you very much, and we'll see you on the next podcast.
And happy Canada Day to those who celebrate, and happy 4th of July to those who celebrate, and happy summer for those of us in the Northern Hemisphere. And here's hoping you have a good winter for those in the South.
Yes, sir.
And thank you.